You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Imagine getting a $2,000 monthly bill, not for your entire engineering department's cloud hosting, and not for a massive enterprise software license. I mean, a $2,000 bill for a single software developer's AI assistant.
Yeah, that is a number that will definitely wake up a CFO.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at why the magic thinking phase of the AI boom is officially over, and why the bill for all that magic is suddenly due.
And it is a very steep bill.
It really is. We've got a fascinating stack of sources for you today, focusing heavily on a couple of deeply analytical editions of the TLDR Founders newsletter from mid-June 2026.
Which are just incredibly revealing about the actual state of the industry right now.
Exactly. So if you've been feeling like the promise of infinite free AI labor hasn't quite matched the reality of running your business, you are definitely not alone. Our mission today is to figure out why building software fast is no longer a competitive advantage, and why the single most valuable asset in tech right now isn't an algorithm at all. It's actually human judgment.
Which is such a pivot from what we were told even a year ago.
Okay, let's unpack this. It feels like we were just promised that AI would, solve everything for free. But now the bill is due. How hard is the reality check hitting the industry right now?
Oh, it's hitting like a freight train. The honeymoon period really has ended. I mean, for the last couple of years, we've seen engineering organizations completely swept up in this sort of corporate agenda setting.
Prioritizing the hype over the fundamentals.
Exactly. There was this widespread trend where data wrangling became less about uncovering the truth to improve real-world decisions and far more about massaging the numbers just to make the C-suite feel comfortable with the millions they were pouring into AI.
Right. So it's basically just mashing the spreadsheet to the hype cycle.
Exactly. But looking at these newsletters, the shareholders and corporate boards have completely lost their patience. They're stepping in.
They want to see the actual money.
Yeah, they are demanding evidence of return on investment, which means the executives are finally being held accountable. They're being forced to look at the balance sheets. And what they're finding is that AI compute is essentially a very expensive utility. It is not a magical infinite resource.
Which brings us to the literal costs that are breaking these illusions. Because the AI cost crunch is hitting the tools themselves.
Right, the tools the developers use to build the software.
Yeah. The newsletter highlighted a shift at Microsoft that, to me, perfectly illustrates this. By June 30th of 2026, Microsoft is pulling its own experiences and devices engineers off of Claude Code.
Which is huge.
It is. They are taking away the cutting-edge coding assistant from the very people building their products, and the mechanism behind why they're doing it comes down to how AI pricing actually works.
The token bills.
Right. They were seeing token bills hitting $2,000 per engineer per month. For anyone listening who might not be, deep in the weeds of large language model pricing, we should probably break down what a token actually is, because it's the invisible meter running in the background of everything.
It's a crucial concept. In the AI world, a token is roughly equivalent to a syllable of a word. So every single time an AI model reads a prompt or writes a line of code or, analyzes a document, it is processing tokens.
And they charge for every single one.
Fractions of a cent for every token. It sounds microscopic, but when you have an AI agent constantly reading entire code bases, suggesting thousands of lines of code and rewriting them over and over.
Those syllables add up to millions of tokens a day. It's like leaving the water running in every sink in your house, 247, and then being shocked by the utility bill.
That is exactly what it is. Microsoft looked at that usage-based model and realized it was completely unsustainable, so they're moving those engineers over to a flat-rate Copilot system just to cap the bleeding.
And they aren't the only ones doing this math. GitHub just flipped all of its Copilot plans to a usage-based AI credit billing model on June 1st.
Which fundamentally alters the economics of running a software company. I mean, historically, the beautiful thing about software margins was that they were mostly fixed.
You pay the salaries to build the app, and then distributing it is virtually free.
Right. Distributing it to one user or a million users costs roughly the same. But when your core building tool and the product you're selling suddenly has a variable, skyrocketing cost tied directly to how often it thinks, well, those classic margins compress rapidly.
It's like being in a gold rush where you think you've struck it rich, but the pickaxes suddenly cost $2,000 a month.
That's a great way to put it.
And to make matters worse, the moment you find a new digging technique, every other miner on the mountain copies it instantly. because the speed of building things has become completely commoditized.
Yeah, Jesse Zhang, the CEO of Decagon, articulated this perfectly in the sources. He pointed out that every AI market feels impossibly crowded right now.
Because everyone can build everything so fast.
Exactly. These AI tools have compressed the timeline required to build and copy new features down to almost zero. He gave a really grounded example of a customer service AI sales cycle.
Oh, right, when Dekian goes in to pitch?
Yeah, they go into a room to pitch their product, and the competitive landscape is just brutal. They aren't just competing with like three other hungry AI startups. They are being compared to massive legacy players like Salesforce and Google, who are just bolting AI onto their existing platform.
Plus the older established platforms like Intercom.
Right. And the real kicker, they are competing against the customer's own internal MVP.
Yeah, their own minimum viable product. Because the client's internal engineering team can just use Claude or ChatGPT to spin up a bare-bones version of what you're trying to sell them over a weekend.
It's insane. Zhang notes that because of this, the speed of shipping a new feature is completely dead as a durable moat.
Because if you lose a major sales deal today because your app lacks a specific integration,
The second your competitor announces it, that feature goes straight onto every other company's roadmap.
okay, I have to push back here. If speed doesn't matter anymore, and unique software features don't matter because they just get instantly cloned, aren't all these AI startups just climbing the wrong mountain? I mean, the article talked about founders fixating on familiar problems, pouring all their capital into building the best tool, but if anyone can duplicate it in a week, what's the point?
That is the existential crisis facing Silicon Valley right now. If your standalone software can be copied in a week and running the AI to power it drains your bank account, you really have no business.
Oh, how do you survive?
Well, the premise laid out in the newsletter is called Decisions and Dollars. It argues that as AI models get smarter, standalone software companies have to morph into data companies and fintech companies.
Okay, so you can't just be an app anymore.
Right. And the only real moat left to protect them is what they call the learning loop.
Let's get into the mechanics of that. How does a learning loop actually protect a company's intellectual property when, like we said, everything is copyable?
So a learning loop is a system built on top of the underlying AI model, but it's designed specifically to capture proprietary data. You aren't just renting access to an AI's brain through an API.
You're actually building an interface.
Yes, an interface where your users' daily interactions, and more importantly, their corrections, compound over time into intellectual property that belongs only to you.
Ah, so the valuable data isn't just the raw text of an email or a block of code, it's the human judgment applied to it.
Precisely, because when an AI generates code or drafts a report, it's dealing in probabilities. It gets you like 80% of the way there.
But it's not quite right for your specific context.
Exactly. A human has to step in, recognize the nuance, and fix it. That correction, that specific moment of human judgment, is data that no standardized internet scrape captures.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that concept completely reframes a massive financial move mentioned in the sources that had me totally confused initially. XAI recently took a $60 billion option on Cursor.
Yes.
Now, Cursor is a very popular AI code editor, but I was struggling to understand the logic. I mean, there's no way a text editor is worth $60 billion. What is XAI actually buying here?
They are buying the real-time stream of human judgment. They didn't do it to own a piece of software. They did it to get inside what the industry calls the token flow.
The token flow.
Right. By owning Cursor, XAI gets to observe exactly when, where, and how top-tier human developers are rejecting the AI suggestions and writing their own solutions.
Oh, wow. So they're capturing the exact moments where the AI fails and the human succeeds.
Exactly. Which leads to the ultimate survival rule mentioned in the sources for companies terrified of giant models copying them. Let agents read, but guard the rights.
Meaning, you let the AI read all the context, synthesize the data, suggest the actions. But the final execution, the actual writing to the database, must pass through a human checkpoint.
Yeah, the sources call this workflow paradigm the AI pull request.
Like in traditional software engineering.
Right, where a junior developer writes a new piece of code and submits a pull request. A senior developer then has to review it, check for errors, and formally accept it before it goes live.
Yeah.
We have to start treating AI agents exactly like eager, hyper-productive junior developers.
They need containment.
They desperately need containment.
Wait. I have to challenge this premise. We are spending billions of dollars training these hyper-advanced models to do our work for us. But now the industry is saying we have to treat them like interns who need every single sentence double-checked.
Yeah, pretty much.
But if the AI does the heavy lifting and I have to review every single output, doesn't that just make me a full-time editor?
It absolutely makes you a full-time editor. But what we have to realize is that the value equation has completely flipped. Generating the text or the code, the heavy lifting, is now cheap. It's commoditized.
Right.
The financial value doesn't live in the generation anymore. It lives entirely in the editing. Knowing exactly what text is correct or why a specific piece of code works for your company's weird legacy database, that critical context is priceless.
Okay, so if the actual value of a product is defined by human judgment in the building phase, what happens when we try to sell that product? Because if you're stripping the human out of the sales process to save money, doesn't that fundamentally break the trust you need to close a deal?
It absolutely does. The sources highlight a massive failure in using AI for go-to-market strategies, and it is directly tied to this lack of human
A
judgment.
GTM failure.
Right. AI promised to supercharge B2B sales teams. And to be fair, it handles the mechanical tasks beautifully. An AI can scrape the internet, write a highly personalized cold email in 3 seconds, build massive target lists, transcribe calls.
But the newsletter points out the glaring flaw. None of those automated tasks actually win deals.
Because the deals aren't won in the inbox. They are won in what the sources call the boring upstream call.
Which is what exactly?
It's the deeply strategic human process of sitting in a room and deciding which accounts to chase in the first place and exactly why your product solves their specific pain point right now.
And if you outsource that upstream decision to an AI vendor,
You end up in a nightmare scenario. You let the AI pick your targets, but your competitors are using the exact same AI tool trained on the exact same internet data to build their lists.
oh, so you all end up bombarding the exact same accounts with the exact same automated emails.
It's just a race to the bottom.
So are we basically using futuristic AI to just become louder, more annoying door-to-door salespeople?
The market data definitely suggests that, yes. And buyers are completely exhausted by it, which is why it's so illuminating to look at how the real giants are operating. If you look at the top-performing tech companies in 2026, Stripe, Google, Canva, Cloudflare, they are actively leaning away from automated AI outbound bots.
It is incredibly ironic. The biggest tech companies in the world are relying on old-school, human-centric tactics to make their sales.
Exactly. Founder-led content, deep customer education, community building.
They are focusing on building genuine trust before they ever attempt a traditional sales engagement.
Because trust, just like critical judgment, cannot be automated. And this human-centric approach is in stark contrast to a deeply toxic pattern the sources call the 20-year tax.
Oh, I found this part fascinating. Think about the last time you bought enterprise software. If you've been a loyal customer for years, you've integrated their tools, your team is trained, you are considered captive, so the vendor squeezes you, they raise your prices.
But new logos, brand new customers who have never given them a dime.
They get the red carpet.
Yeah, they get a dedicated war room, the CEO hops on a welcome call, free custom integrations.
Meanwhile, the loyal customer gets a brand new customer success manager assigned to them every 14 months who has absolutely no institutional memory.
It is a phenomenal way to destroy trust. And in an era where AI is rapidly lowering the barrier to entry for building software, treating your captive customers poorly is a fatal mistake. Because the reality is, they aren't captive anymore.
Which brings us to perhaps the most fundamental shift covered in these TLDR founders' newsletters, the arrival of the mom-and-pop SaaS era.
Yes.
We defined SaaS earlier as software as a service, charging a flat monthly fee. But the people building that software are changing entirely.
The collapse of software complexity has completely decentralized creation. I mean, historically, building a viable product required a specialized group of engineers, usually in expensive tech hubs like San Francisco.
And massive venture capital funding.
Right. But now, that cost and complexity barrier has just evaporated. You don't need to be a senior engineer to build an app. The people taking over are local domain experts.
Like a logistics manager in Ohio who deeply understands supply chain bottlenecks. They can just spin up a niche software tool to solve that specific problem.
Without raising a dime. This is challenging the dominant narrative that the industry has worshipped for over a decade. We've all internalized this script that the venture-backed rocket ship, where you raise millions and sprint toward an exit, is the only valid way to build a company.
So what does this all mean? Because I look at the traditional VC model a bit like putting a rocket thruster on a bicycle. Yeah, you go incredibly fast, but the moment the terrain gets bumpy, the entire thing disintegrates. It's like a sugar rush.
That's a great analogy.
Whereas the mom and pop sauce era is more like eating a balanced meal. It's
Mm-hmm.
grounded, sustainable, built to navigate the actual terrain of a niche industry.
Hmm?
But if anyone can build software now, and the costs are so variable, aren't we just going to drown in a sea of hyper-niche, localized apps?
We might, but the sources offer some fascinating counterexamples to the venture model to show why this is actually healthy. They point to Patagonia and Warren Buffett.
Wait, Patagonia, the jacket company?
Yeah. Patagonia famously stopped chasing growth, let their core customers dictate the pace, and focused on an environmental mission that actually cost them real money in the short term. And Warren Buffett took cash flow from a dying textile mill and built Berkshire Hathaway into a behemoth entirely without venture capital.
But I have to admit, when I read that part of the newsletter, I was a little lost. How does a massive outdoor apparel brand or an investment firm relate to someone spinning up a localized scheduling app for dentists?
It's about the underlying business architecture. They prove that non-VC, resource-constrained business models are incredibly resilient. And the best example of this smart resource allocation in the sources actually comes from Rivian, the electric vehicle company.
Oh, the Rivian factory story is brilliant. They needed a new facility to build their upcoming, cheaper SUV.
And the standard Silicon Valley playbook says, go raise another $3 billion and pour a massive new concrete facility in the desert.
Right. But instead, their CFO implemented a strict rule. Wring every last drop of efficiency out of the assets you already own. They figured out how to engineer and build the new car inside their existing factory.
Which is incredible. By doing that, they saved $2.25 billion. But more importantly, it fundamentally rewired their financial trajectory.
By sharing the factory space, they spread their fixed overhead costs over a much larger volume of cars.
Exactly. That made their older, more expensive vehicle lines cheaper to produce, too. They tripled their revenue in 2 years while keeping their operating costs completely flat.
That is the hardware equivalent of staffing for the work you actually have today, rather than the work you hope you'll have in 5 years. And that level of grounded, pragmatic business decision-making is exactly what software companies need right now to survive the AI cost crunch.
Which loops us right back to a critical new metric mentioned in the sources, compute-adjusted LTV.
Compute-adjusted lifetime value.
Yes, this is where the math of the AI era gets really dangerous. In the old software model, you had fixed margins. Adding a new user to your server costs fractions of a penny.
Right.
But with AI, every single time a user interacts with your product, every time they ask the chatbot a question or hit generate, it triggers a variable compute cost. You have a flat $50 subscription coming in, but wildly unpredictable token costs going out.
So if a power user relies on your AI features heavily, running up that token meter we talked about earlier, they could actually cost you $100 a month to service.
That's true.
You are literally paying them to use your product.
Exactly. And that loops us right back to why Microsoft yanked its engineers off that expensive coding tool. If your tools or your users are bleeding your compute budget dry, your margins vanish overnight.
Right.
You have to constantly measure that compute-adjusted LTV to ensure you are building a sustainable business.
Not just subsidizing a very expensive science experiment.
Right.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening dive. If we step back and look at the big picture across all these TLDR founders' newsletters, how do we synthesize all these shifts?
The unifying thread is that the era of relying on AI as a silver bullet for growth is definitively over. As AI commoditizes the speed of software development, basic coding, and mechanical outbound sales, those things are no longer competitive advantages.
So what's left?
What remains incredibly valuable are the assets that are stubbornly human, the things the model simply cannot generate on its own.
Right. It is the critical human judgment required to guard the rights and correct the model, creating that proprietary learning loop.
Yes. And it is the genuine, unautomatable community trust built by a founder. And it's the grounded business pragmatism of choosing to reuse an old factory, or recognizing that treating your loyal customers better than strangers is the only way to survive.
AI is rapidly forcing the tech industry to double down on what actually makes us human.
Exactly that.
And that brings us to a deeply fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling place to leave things today. We started by talking about the end of magic thinking and how human judgment, that final correction, the AI pull request, is the only thing a rival AI can't just greet from the internet.
Right.
But I want you to think about the long-term mechanics of that loop. If our human judgment, our daily edits and corrections, are the ultimate training data, What happens in 5 years when the AI stops asking for our pull request approvals? What happens when it has watched us make enough of those boring upstream decisions that it starts executing them entirely on its own? Will we even realize we've been cut out of the loop? Thanks for exploring with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Spoken Tech for your ears.